our borders, if we're going to protect our economy from President Trump's tariff threats. The Americans and the premiers are all concerned the Prime Minister is too weak to do that. And the data from his own immigration department confirm that fact. According to documents produced by his ministry, there are between 20,000 and 500,000 people in Canada that are not supposed to be here. And there are another 3 million that have to leave within the next year. What is the plan to ensure that people who should leave do leave?
There is no plan.
The Right Honourable Prime
There is none.
Mr. Speaker, every year there are visitor visas and work permits and student visas that expire, and every year the vast majority of those people return home to their countries. We have procedures and processes in place to make sure that that does happen. We have consequences if they don't. We will continue to strengthen those. But continuing to talk down our country, continue to talk down our systems is something that the Leader of the Opposition is doing, because he's more focused on trying to get elected than he is on actually solving the problems Canadians are facing. That's why we continue to step up and deliver on the needs of Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Another weak answer from a weak leader, Mr. Speaker. The reality is he says that people just voluntarily leave when their permits and visas are up. But his minister admitted this week that that is impossible to prove because they don't keep track. And the closest thing they could get to an answer was their department saying estimates from academic sources range from between 20,000 and 500,000 persons, although there may be more. We're talking about people who should not be in our country. So once again, what is the plan?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, once again, we laid out an immigration plan just a few weeks ago. It talks about how we're going to make sure that our immigration numbers allow for our economy to catch up, for our home building to catch up. We have a strong and robust immigration system that has delivered for Canadians over decades now. And the fact that the Leader of the Opposition continually throws up his hands to say that Canada is broken is talking down not just our institutions, but Canadians themselves. Canadians are optimistic and ambitious about the future. That's why we continue to invest in them. His answer is cuts to services, cuts to benefits, cuts to Canadians.
For Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister promised that Canadians would see real change to our electoral system. It's been 9 years, and in true Liberal fashion, he broke this promise and let Canadians down. Clearly, this was an election.
That says more about you than him for still trusting him after all this time.
Partisan games and a lack of representation in Canada's Parliament. And the Conservatives, well, they sure don't want to make it better because they only care about the profits of their rich corporate friends. Will the Prime Minister tell Canadians why he dropped the ball on electoral reform?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I very much care about electoral reform. I've been very clear that I would bring in a ranked ballot tomorrow if we had that option. But really, to see the NDP turning its back on workers right now, asking a question about electoral reform when Canadians are worried about whether or not the opposition parties are going to support the tax break that they need or the investments in workers that they deserve. Right now, we need a party and a parliament that is focused on helping and supporting Canadians as they get us all through this difficult time with their hard work, with their ambition. And right now, talking about politics is the last thing Canadians want to see from this.
What? He's turning on them!
The Honourable Member for Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, what the Prime Minister isn't saying is the fact that seniors and persons with disabilities are workers.
No, he's fucking turning on the only people that are keeping them in power.
Put a roof over their head or to afford food. But a recent report from the Edmonton suggests that the minimum wage just isn't enough to survive. People are having to make tough choices. They cannot afford their groceries, they cannot afford their medication, and they cannot afford their rent. But the Liberals are holding up relief by excluding seniors and persons with disabilities in the $250 rebate. Worse yet, the Conservatives would cut. Will the Liberals stop letting Canadians down during this difficult time?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as of next year, because of this government, Canadians with disabilities will be receiving $200 every single month. That is making a real difference in the lives of Canadians living with disabilities, and we know there is more to do, and we will be doing more. In regards to workers, it's astonishing to see the new Democratic Party of Canada turn its back on workers and say that workers don't deserve a little support. Workers don't deserve to be recognized for the efforts that they did to get us through the pandemic, to get us through the global inflation crisis. These are things that we're standing up to see and recognize workers, and the NDP is blocking it.
The Honourable Member for Kingston and the Islands.
Mr. Speaker, last week our government announced measures that will provide financial supports for Canadians over the holidays. These measures should be supported by all MPs. However, we know the Leader of the Opposition has muzzled his members. According to one Conservative MP, we recently learned that, quote, everybody is being watched. What we say, what we do, who we talk to, end quote. The Leader of the Conservative Party has gone so far as to stop his MPs from asking the government for supports. Can the Prime Minister explain why the Leader of the Opposition should unmuzzle his MPs and allow them to support Canadians instead of forcing them to repeat his embarrassingly bad slogans?
I don't know what's leaving first, man. This guy's job or his hairline?
That question is not regarding the administration of government.
Yeah, you dumbass. The House Speaker rarely puts Liberals in line.
See that the Prime Minister...
And he's extremely disappointed with the Liberals right now.
That was not regarding the administration of government.
That's a rare W. Rare W for the House Speaker.
Stop, please. Order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it looks like the member for Kingston is not getting into cabinet after all.
Did you see Michelle Ferrari in the back?
Happiness wherever they go. Others bring happiness whenever they go. Mr. Speaker, this is a 2-month tax trick that will print cash, add to inflation, and make Canadians worse off. And if the Prime Minister disagrees, why won't he stop being so weak? Why won't he have the courage to call a carbon tax election and allow Canadians to vote to axe the tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Man, that's funny.
Canadians elect members of Parliament to be their voice in Ottawa, not Ottawa's voice or their leader's voice in their communities. But the Conservative leader shamefully puts his own interests ahead of Canadians. We announced a tax break for all Canadians, a $250 rebate to put more money in the pockets of working Canadians, and Conservative MPs know their constituents want this, need this, and support this, but the Conservative leader is muzzling them and forcing them to vote against direct support for Canadians. Shame on him.
Oh my goodness. Let's go, Pierre. Clap back.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister's radical liberalization of hard drugs has been lethal for Canadians, 47,000 of whom have died of overdoses since this Prime Minister took office, more than died in the Second World War fighting for Canada. Overdose deaths are up 200%, and now our American friends say they may hit us with tariffs because of the Prime Minister's liberal policies on fentanyl. How many lives and jobs is this Prime Minister willing to sacrifice for his radical liberal agenda?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we are using all the tools at our disposal to save lives and keep communities safe.
At our disposable?
Meanwhile, Conservatives are choosing to use struggling people as political props to spread fear and misinformation. From the very beginning, we have been there to work on an evidence-based, compassionate public policy, public health approach. We have been there and we will always be there to work with provinces and territories to meet this time of crisis. While the Conservative leader plays politics, we're going to be there to support Canadians grounded in science and evidence.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, the science and evidence are now proven. After 9 years of radical liberalization of drugs, overdose deaths are up by 200%. And the worst overdose numbers come from British Columbia, where the policies have been most radically and enthusiastically implemented. But the NDP Liberals claimed that they were backtracking on decriminalization because it became so unpopular. Just this week, NDP Liberals voted for a committee report that called for full legalization of hard drugs. Will the Prime Minister admit that is his real agenda?
Yeah.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, having an evidence-based and a science-based approach, compassionate public policy approach grounded in health care to the opioid epidemic is what we need to do, not just to save lives, but to create safer communities. While the Leader of the Opposition plays politics and uses suffering people as props to propagate a brokenist view of this country, we're going to continue to roll up our sleeves, work hard with provinces and territories to respond to this tragedy, to make sure we're putting Canadians first in everything we do.